it's not that I don't find great inspiration and truth in the Bible. I just feel that it is not the whole story, and the edits are horrendous. In fact, even in the very, what is it, the first sentence, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Well, the real translation is, in the beginning, the gods created the heavens and the earth. So it's plural. And Elohim, that's right. And of course, Mary Magdalene was supposed to be Jesus's representative, and to take on the mantle of the leader of his early church. And of course, because of Saint Paul the imposter, as I call him, the women were vilified, and suddenly Mary Magdalene is a prostitute.
Broaderlands Podcast.
The opinions expressed on Broaderlands Podcast are those of the guest speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of the host or Broaderlands Podcast.
Lesley Mitchell-Clarke, thank you for coming on Broaderlands Podcast. It's an honor and privilege.
Oh, Boo-Boo, it's my great honor as well to simply be here, to be chatting with you in Arizona, where I spent an awful lot of time. And as you said, I'm Lesley Mitchell-Clarke, and I am by profession board certified clinical master hypnotherapist. And one of the things that I focus on, or perhaps my specialty, you would say, is I work with individuals who believe that they may have had incidents of high strangeness or contact with ETs in some way. And I help them to retrieve lost or suppressed memories. And I'm also an author, and at my advanced age, I'm even back in university now, and not too long from this date, I will be a psychotherapist. So all is going well. But at any rate, that's what I do. I also, for the past 12, 13 years, I've been the co-host of a podcast called Contact TV. And right this moment, I'm also the director of a one-day event. It's called the Contact and Disclosure Symposium, and it's happening in Toronto at a fabulous place called the Off-World Bar. You should see it, Boo-Boo. It's ridiculous. It's like a movie set. Anyway, that's where we're having our thing. We have incredible guests, including Daniel Sheehan, and that's what I'm doing. And then I'm here with you.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Maybe I have to go check that out. Yeah.
Cool.
I'm studying to be a gynecologist. I don't know if you know that. No, I'm just messing around.
Wow. Okay. Oops. Okay. Good night, ladies and gentlemen. No.
I like to clown around a little bit. Maybe share a little bit about your upbringing and how this all came about. How'd you get into alien ETs and UFOs and
okay. Well,
all that good stuff.
It's always been an interest of mine, and as an actress and a singer, which has been my other, what do I say, corresponding career, many like-minded people I always came in contact with, but I've always had these interests. And I suppose you could say that my major interest turned on when I saw, Eric von Daniken's little, Super 8 film. And I remember showing at the drive-in, and about 20 of us got into the trunk of somebody's big American car, and we all watched it. But that absolutely blew my little 15-year-old mind. Now, later on, not too much later on, when I was about 16, I was working as a apprentice actor in the Summerstock Theater. And during that stint, and also the year following, I had many incidents of sightings of craft. Some craft so close that you could actually see, like, portholes, if you will, to, and of course, this was in the Black Hills of South Dakota. That's where the Rushmore heads are. It's in Rushmore State Park, right? That's where I was. And because it is sacred Lakota land, there's a no-fly. It's a no-fly zone. So whatever I saw had nothing to do with any kind of military or commercial craft of any sort. And now, many years later, I was, I guess you could say I was having kind of a midlife crisis. Now, luckily, I didn't go out and buy a red Porsche and get a mistress. Thank goodness. My husband was very happy about that. But anyway, so what I did instead is I was just so confused, and my husband, great guy, he said, well, you know what? I'm going to buy you a past life regression because I think you need some insight. I can't say what you need to do. I know you're looking for something with more substance and meaning. So I said, great. So I went for this past life regression to a very noted person. And it was informative, yes, and fascinating, yes. But the main thing that I took away is I knew I could do that kind of work. I just knew it. I cannot tell you why, but I can tell you that hypnosis as a practice is over 10,000 years old. So there have always been, in sophisticated societies, there have always been, except maybe in the Middle Ages where everything went down the tubes, but there have always been hypnotherapeutic practitioners. It is an ancient modality. So for whatever reason, I was determined to do that thing. So very quickly after that, I got my basic certification, which is kind of scary. It's a little bit like a 15-year-old having a driver's license. Yeah, you know the rules, but it's a little wacky. But I simply adored it. Now, over the years following that, I took many different certifications. I'm also certified in pediatric hypnosis, pain management, addictions, and also what we call metaphysical hypnosis, which involves past life regression, interlife regression, and also something that we call, well, I call it energy release. It's sometimes called entity release. So I'm certified to be a regressionist. Now, what happened professionally that sort of kick-started my involvement with experiencers, I was working in a very upscale, sort of snooty, like imagine Beverly Hills, but it was called Yorkville, but wealthy, bored women, with facelifts, and that was the clientele there. But Shirley MacLaine made the place very successful because she knew my mentor very well, and she would go there to the Ontario Hypnosis Center. So that's what it was called. Anyway, about once a month, some individual would call in and they would say, I have missing time, or I have, odd triangular scars on my body, or, I woke up and my clothes were on backwards, whatever it was. And none of the other practitioners, some of who were psychotherapists and psychologists, none of them wanted to touch any of that with a 10-foot pole.
Right.
I, however, was fascinated. So I said, bring it on, bring it on. And so they began sending me the experiencer clients, and I began honing or defining a regression technique to work specifically with these people who are also traumatized a lot of the times. So we're dealing with also kind of PTSD like symptoms. Sometimes they're afraid for no reason. It's just the act of leaving their bodies or being taken. Anyway, so I began seeing these people, and before too long, I became part of Kathleen Martin's experiencer research program, which was conducted through MUFON. And I saw hundreds of people contributing the results to a massive data research program. And then after that, it has just been, and after my first book too, that was also very helpful. I wrote a book about all this, and it's just been, steady as you go. And now I'm thinking in terms of, wow, I should teach some other experienced hypnotherapists how to do this protocol. And I think that's got to be coming up, because it's too much for one person. This is too big a thing. It's too global. It's too widespread. There have to be many experienced practitioners who know how to gently, safely guide people through their past, so that we don't add to any pain or trauma. So that's something I'm thinking of doing now, is developing a protocol to teach other practitioners.
Yeah, thank you. How would you invite someone that's a skeptic to listen to this conversation?
Wow. I think what I would say is, it is important to always keep an open mind. No matter how sure you are of something, it's always important to keep an open mind. And I can tell you that once, if you observe a hypnotic process, there's much footage of, like, my colleague Mary Rodwell on YouTube. You can watch people doing these kinds of inductions. Once you see the human emotion that is attached to the recall of these events of high strangeness, it becomes very hard to discount what the person is saying. Because, we're not talking about a bunch of people who are, Laurence Olivier or, what's a Meryl Streep. We're not talking about actors here. Is it possible to fool me? I'm not, what's the word I'm looking for? I think yes. In fact, I can tell you, I even know when it happened once, but I was hip to it kind of early on in the process. So it wasn't as if I was taken in, but yes, I think it would be possible for somebody maybe who has some kind of borderline personality disorder to fool me. But before I work with anyone, at least in my province and in Canada, I am not allowed by law to work with individuals who have been diagnosed with a mental illness. Now, I'm not just talking about anxiety or depression. I'm talking about schizophrenia, psychosis, sociopathy, borderline personality disorder, serious stuff. So before I see anyone, I go through a very lengthy intake. And by the time I'm done with that, I have a very accurate idea from the questions that I've asked as to whether I'm dealing with somebody who is mentally healthy, because they generally won't reveal their past to me. That's, that you have to be prepared for that people, if they have a psychiatric past, they're probably not going to reveal it. So I have to ascertain it, from questions and such. So it's very rare that I don't have someone in my chair in trance who isn't a genuine experiencer.
Yeah, thank you. You brought up earlier energy release and entity release. Like, what's the difference? Can we have entity attachments?
That's just a big tricky thing for me. I mean, as a good Irish Catholic girl, certainly I was brought up to believe that, the Satan or negative entities could influence you, attach to you, what have you. I would say that, let's just say, yes, that exists in a certain small percentage, that there are discarnate negative entities who are, getting off on the life force of a weakened individual. Let's say that happens, that is a percentage. I think the bigger percentage is about guilt and things that we internalize, and that it is in fact a psychological issue. But listen, the energy release or entity release, whichever way you do it, is hugely therapeutic. And people can actually get rid of guilt and feelings of feelings of terrible self-image and all the rest of it. They can release these things through a very profound process. So I think when I was learning to do it, and I this is not political, please don't take it in any kind of political way, but the way you learn to do these processes is in class with other practitioners. That's how we do it. So I was working with a gal and practicing the energy entity release protocol. And we ended up releasing guilt and sorrow from a pregnancy that she had terminated many years ago. And it was so long ago that she didn't even have it in her mind, but yet her body was carrying, I would have to say, some form of grief. Now, everyone doesn't necessarily feel like that. That's, I'm not supporting the pro-life people in that way, but for this woman, the loss of that pregnancy, the termination of that pregnancy was a guilt and a sorrow that she had not released but suppressed. So anything that releases suppressed negative feelings is, in fact, entity release or energy release. Well, I think most of the time now, as I said, I completely accept that it's totally possible for potent negative entities who are living off somebody's life force to find somebody with a weakened system, a weakened aura, who's in addiction, very common, or profound illness, and is literally sucking the life force right out of that person. I know that exists. So we're dealing not only with that, but in the bigger picture, energy release deals with the release of trauma, most often in this life, this current, what we call the present life.
Yeah, thank you. That's I'm fascinated. One of my major topics here on my platform is addiction, and I've been sober since 2009. But
bless you.
The crazy,
that's great.
Oh, yeah, thanks. And Carl Jung talked about spiritus contra spiritum in Latin, spirit against spirits, and he's talking about alcohol. But in the deeper sense, there's these other entities that can be attached if someone is an alcoholic, is an addict. Because they all have trauma. The core of the problem is trauma, right? And they're stuck in this lower state.
It is. They are stuck, or they believe that they don't deserve a better state than that low vibrational zone in which they live. Now you know this. I'm just going to come out about this right now. Many years ago, I had a very serious cocaine problem. I mean, I must have snorted up half of Bogota. I'm telling you, it was bad. It was the 80s. Everybody was doing it. Nobody realized it was addictive. We thought it was great. Oh, you've got energy. You stay thin. I mean, it's not addictive. I mean, we had all wrong ideas. But I must tell you that any kind of use of a narcotic like that is going to cause such changes in brain chemistry that you will become vulnerable, or can become vulnerable, to oppression. And like I have, and I'm just going to also come out about a person who sees things, and always has. Sometimes if I was looking at someone who was involved in an addictive process, I would see their aura and it would be full of holes like Swiss cheese. So there is a psychophysical aspect to addiction. And I believe it has to do because when you are say with cocaine, for instance, when you're stimulating the pleasure centers of your brain, you are not producing a proper amount of melatonin. So brain chemistry is affected in all kinds of ways that aren't yet fully understood by, chemical and narcotic addiction, alcohol addiction. And there's all kinds of addiction. It doesn't have to be a substance. Some of the most
Behavior.
difficult, oh gosh, yes. Some of the most difficult addictions to deal with that I have found are what we would call process addictions, which are things like gambling, addiction to pornography, anything where you're using your own body chemistry, where every time you win a couple of bucks, you get a dopamine bump. So that is even more difficult and even more destructive sometimes than any kind of chemical or narcotic addiction.
And the more we do that, and we get that dopamine bump or that hit, those receptors become desensitized, so we're always going to
Exactly.
need more, and then
Exactly.
the behavior gets worse.
Yes.
Yeah, in all aspects. Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you.
And our judgment centers, the frontal lobe is completely truncated. That's why,
Mm-hmm.
people talk about, the alcoholic personality or the drug addict personality. These are people who have no brakes. They want immediate gratification. I'm speaking of myself. I put myself right in that category. So that was the thing that I had no power over the use of cocaine. Maybe it was something I did in a previous lifetime. I don't know. But in the 80s, it was rampant. So some of it was the times when I was there and working in the music business. I mean, imagine you go to do a studio date where you're singing like some guide tracks for Madonna or whatever, and somebody comes over and pays you with like an ounce of cocaine. I mean, like a tamal, an ounce of cocaine. That was typical of those days. So it was a very crazy time. But yes, addiction is spirit killing. It makes the brain chemistry completely erratic and dysfunctional and invites negative influences. I mean, just look at the people you end up hanging out with, right? When you're in the depths,
Yeah,
look at the people that are there with you. My God, it's like friggin' purgatory.
yeah. Even the Buddhists talk about this stuff, the hungry ghost. The
Oh,
different entities. Yeah.
they do actually, because there are entities. Now, I think as above, so below. And I think that people that have had ET experiences or sightings of crafts or what have you have also had what we would call psychic or spiritual or paranormal experiences. And myself, I've had so many, I can't even, I can't even begin to count. But it's part and parcel of the abilities that I believe ETs are looking for in in an overall kind of way. It's the common denominator, if you will, that experiencers have, I believe, is psychic ability.
Why is that?
Well, I've given a good deal of thought to this. There are a couple of answers, but one of the big ones is I think that most of the evolved species or the evolved beings that we deal with or that have been encountering humankind are in fact telepathic. Yes, they can speak, but why speak when the speed of thought is so much faster, right? And, even what we're doing with the internet and such and emails, it's like training wheels. We're like, I think maybe every great civilization, the Atlanteans, Lemuria, the Anunnaki had to go through a process like this, where we had, almost the speed of thought communication. So what I think is happening here is, that the beings that are evolved are simply engaging with those who are most sensitive, and not only who can, communicate telepathically, but who are capable of bilocation. And that takes me to a big point, because I have to say that many experiencers, I would have to say most experiencers, who are in midlife or beyond that, no longer have experiences where their dense physical body is taken somewhere. They are so good at astral projecting or bilocating or remote viewing, whatever you want to call it. They're so good at that they can actually send their psychophysical body, to a craft and engage in activities and tasks, and in fact never really be truly separated from their physical meat suit down here. And the kinds of, and I will call them abductions, where somebody's physical body is taken and levitated out the window or through the roof, or however they do it, that is much more common in people who are under 40, I would say.
Well, thank you. You said before we get into your experience with working with people that are experiencers having these encounters, I wanted to ask you something about growing up Catholic, but then how do you feel about the Anunnaki stories?
Well, first of all, I think that the Bible is sort of a Cliff's Notes version of what actually happened, right?
Me too.
It's not complete. Also, it has been retranslated Greek to Aramaic to it's been translated, and every priest and every calligrapher has done their own little edits. The apocryphal books of the Bible were thrown out at the Council of Nicaea. There were many things that were thrown out, including, a same-sex ceremony for individuals who were dedicated to each other, but weren't a man and a woman. There used to be a ceremony in the early church for that. So all kinds of things went by the wayside. Certain saints were out. And in fact, I think it's, to quote a line from, oh God, the Da Vinci Code, one day, Jesus was a good, wonderful man, and the next day, he was a god, representing, Osiris and all the other pagan gods. So, I it's not that I don't find great inspiration and truth in the Bible. I just feel that it is not the whole story, and the edits are horrendous. In fact, even in the very, what is it, the first sentence, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Well, the real translation is, in the beginning, the gods created the heavens and the earth. So it's plural. And Elohim, that's right. And of course, Mary Magdalene was supposed to be Jesus's representative, and to take on the mantle of the leader of his early church. And of course, because of, St. Paul, the imposter, as I call him, the women were vilified, and suddenly Mary Magdalene is a prostitute, and she was in fact a very wealthy woman who owned a shipping enterprise. Her brother was Lazarus, by the way, who Jesus raised from the dead. He was the brother of Mary of Magdalene. So anyway, it's just the Bible is, truths, half truths, mistruths, wrong names. Um, it, I'm afraid it cannot be considered a historical authority.
Oh, that's for sure. But it does have some beauty. Like if you do practice and apply these principles, you can really enhance your spiritual growth and your
Oh,
consciousness and
yes.
expand your heart. But the stories and stuff, they've been translated and changed around so many times. And I totally agree with that. Even like made in the image of us or in our likeness, like who's us? Who's
Yeah, who's
why is it?
us? Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
So
So there are now what worries me is the uneducated, fundamental right-wing, Christians will take something, literal and completely misinterpret it and turn it into some kind of crazy ass doctrine. So this is the problem with the divine word of God. Do I believe it's the divine word of God? I do not. Lightning bolt coming. No lightning bolt came in to wipe me out, so that's okay. So no, I do not. Now, let's talk about Zachariah Sitchin's work for just a moment, and his incredible translations of the Sumerian cylinder scrolls. And it's very easy to see that much of the Bible, much of the Old Testament, is involved with half brothers who were struggling for power, Enki and Enlil. Enki had a kind of a Dr. Moreau like, setup going on where he was working on genetic manipulation to try and upgrade the Denisovans or Neanderthals into a worker humanoid who could take orders and talk. And we have Enlil, who was, in fact, he is Yahweh of the Old Testament. He's the
yeah,
angry, jealous
jealous
God.
God. Yeah.
He's the guy that tried to get Abraham to sacrifice his son. Now, what kind of God does that? That is not godlike. That is something else. He's fucking around with these
I
people,
think that
pretending to be a god, and certainly, they were extremely tall, way taller than we are. 7 feet would not have been unusual. They talk about them sometimes as the shining ones. They may have had a kind of a glow about them. Their blood was allegedly copper based rather than iron based, but they did have what we would call O negative blood. So I have O negative blood. So those of us in the world, tiny percentage. It is thought that we are in fact direct descendants because that's the first blood group that ever occurred in the world, in humanity.
mm,
So we have two brothers fighting. We have imperfect beings fighting amongst themselves, using nukes at one point. I mean, there's a reason why there is vitrified sand in Iraq. Now, that doesn't happen from any kind of ordinary weather situation, even lightning. What that had to mean is that there was nuclear activity, and it created that level of heat that there would be vitrified sand throughout the deserts of Iraq. Um, and you could say that because so many cultures around the world have a hierarchy of gods that seem to really resemble the 12 main gods from that came from the planet Nibiru. You can find it in the Norse legends, you can find it with Greeks, and of course the Romans who devised their thing from the Greeks, the Tuatha De Danann. And I would imagine, although I am not qualified to really discuss that, but I would imagine that within the countries of Africa and India and the subcontinent, and certainly in Asia, you can find comparable beings. So it's my feeling that it was a global operation, which is why we have pyramids that surround the circumference of the earth, that we have pyramids all over the world. It's the reason why in Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl is talked about a tall, red-haired man. And Enki, I feel that was Enki. He's often referred to as the serpent, and I'm not sure exactly why, but some individuals have put forward the idea that because he was involved in DNA, which looks like two serpents in a helix, that is why he is referred to as a serpent. He is the serpent in the Garden of Eden. It's all a metaphor. It's about self-knowledge. When Adam and Eve discovered that they were actually the children of Anunnaki, that changed everything. So that's original sin. It wasn't sin, it was knowledge, the tree of knowledge. They called the tree of good and evil the tree of knowledge. They ate from
Yeah,
the
you're
tree of
right.
knowledge.
No, I totally agree with you, and it's like our medical symbol today.
Yeah, the
You know,
caduceus.
yeah.
Yeah, it lives on the staff and the intertwined snakes representing DNA. We still use Enki's symbol, the caduceus.
Even in the Bible, Jesus says, "Be wise like a serpent, soft like a dove." It sounds like Kukulkan.
Mm-hmm.
Khan.
It sounds
Inky.
very much like Kukulkan, doesn't it, though? Doesn't
Yeah.
it, though? Now, in addition to the Anunnaki, though, who came from planet Nibiru trying to repair their atmosphere, and somehow with the technology they had then, they were able to get through the asteroid belt. There is a it was Anu who first came to Earth, and apparently he used something like water, like a giant kind of water gun to push various meteors out of the way. But we also talk about the five fingers of man, because not everyone in this planet looks like a tall Nordic Scandinavian skier. We don't all look like Dolph Lundgren. There's that, but we also have the people of Africa, the people of Asia, the Maori people, the Aboriginals of Australia. I mean, we have a great variety of DNA that I believe has been laid upon us. So it is not just the Anunnaki. And I don't know what you think about this, but of course there were the huge antediluvian civilizations of Lemuria and Atlantis, which may have been Atlantean civilizations. And if they were multi-ethnic.
Yeah, I believe so as well. And again, going back to the serpent symbology, I mean, you see it in Ohio, that big serpent mount. You see it all over the Americas.
Yeah.
Mexico,
Yeah.
for an example, and Matthew LaCroix
Everywhere.
really does a great job with sharing the symbology between the eagle and the serpent. The eagle representing Enlil and the serpent representing Inky. And when the Spaniards came and conquered Mexico area at the time, the Mayans, all the different tribes and empires, their flag was a eagle at the time. And then you look at the Mexican flag, how it's the eagles, taking over the serpent.
It is,
Interesting,
isn't it?
right?
That is fascinating, and I never really thought about that. But in fact, the evisceration of the indigenous people with the arrival of the Europeans, it is something. It's very hard to even talk about, because we can't even, maybe not only maybe only the Nazi era, but even that can't be comparable. There was blood running through the canals. It was unfucking believable, and they got in there because these dear people thought that here come the gods to save us from our famine and whatever else is going on. They're white, they're tall, here they come. And it was an unfortunate horror. that can never be fully redressed. And I'm going to also include the genocide of the Native Americans and the Native Canadians and the Native peoples, the Aboriginal peoples throughout the globe have been assassinated, violated, genocided by Western Europeans.
Well, they thought it was the return of Quetzalcoatl or Kukulkan, and
They did.
So they caught him off guard. I have a diary of one of the first bishop of Yucatan, and it's sad.
Oh,
it's sad.
God.
I mean, I can only imagine what they didn't leave in there that they took out, because it's sad of some of the stories and what happened to them. So yeah.
Oh, incredible.
Going back to your all your experiences working with people with experiencers, what different types of aliens or ETs do they describe, if you don't mind me asking?
Not at all. Well, there's a wide variety of ETs that are engaging with us. And I would also say that there are many instances where there are collaborative engagements. For instance, it's not unusual to even Travis Walton, your man there, you're not that far from the Snowflake Mountains, right? So your man, Travis Walton, even he talked about at the end of his journey where he believes he was injured to the point of death and was healed by the ETs. It was Nordic humanoid looking beings who actually escorted him out of the craft. So there are, I think that there is a Gene Roddenberry-like federation of planets, for lack of a better term, and that there are many, many worlds in our corner of the galaxy that have evolved to the point where they can get along with each other. And so that is probably one of the big things that is preventing us from moving ahead as a, respectable, evolved member of the Galactic Federation, is that we can't even sort it out amongst ourselves. We have brutal, horrible, violent war occurring all over the place. And I think sometimes the ETs must just look at us with like 5-year-old children who are behaving like brats and peeing on the floor. I mean, I think that's how they must look at us sometimes. But the ETs that many people encounter are the what I would call the Nordics or the humanoids, which includes it includes not only the Anunnaki, they're Lyrans too. So it's the beings that come from the Lyran system. So we're talking about the Yael, the Palladians, all of these types of beings that are very close to us, like our cousins. They seem to come from the Lyran system. So there's a lot of that interaction. A lot of it. And that interaction almost seems to follow genetic lines in the sense that, I have many clients where not only have they had experiences, but their mothers have had experiences and maybe the grandmothers if they know about it. So there's a lot of that. Now there is also, and this may surprise you, there are insectoids, mantis-like beings who are generally extremely loving and caring. It's kind of the opposite of what we would think, because I think we have problems with dealing with anything that's not mammalian, as a race, right? We can't even deal with people who have slightly more pigment than we do. So, this is not good. But anyway, the insectoids are generally very loving, but they don't necessarily travel. And this is, I digress, but this is another thing that some species that are, pretty evolved, they decided long ago that, boy, it's really hard to get in that craft and go through the things and blah, blah, blah. So we're just going to project ourselves. So there are many beings that simply are projecting themselves in such a way, it's like holograms. It's like physicality, but they're right there. But yet their main third density body is back on their planet, and they're in like a meditative state or what have you. So these insectoids are very fond of that, because I think they live mainly underground, if I'm not mistaken. Now also, reptilian beings, which no doubt you've heard about, just like our own world, there are good ones and bad ones. I mean, there are reptilians that we have agreements with, treaties with. So they of course are disturbing to us because they evolved from a reptilian ancestor, and that freaks us out. But it doesn't mean that they are bad souls or bad beings. Yes, there are some tough ones. In fact, when one of the clients that more than one, but some of the clients that I work with have been involved in what I would call the secret space program, and therefore they have been billeted on Mars. Well, on Mars, which of course has a full base that we've had since the 50s, on Mars there are several groups of reptilians. They all live underground, and we have treaties with, I think, most of them, but there are some isolated groups who still will come out and skirmish and fight and draw people into their tunnels, and there are casualties and what have you. So there are all kinds of reptilians as well. Now the Greys, which there are so many types of Greys. There are, there are the Ebens, there are the Zeta Reticulites. The Zeta Reticulites have been engaging with us for a very long time, and they are, of course, that is a standard gray look. And somewhere along the line, they apparently had a crisis where they were unable to reproduce, and a lot of other stuff. So along came what we call the Truman Agreement. Now, this happened after the Roswell crash, and the thing to remember is some of those ETs did survive, and a deal was made at that time where the Greys, the Zeta Reticulites, binary system, they would provide us with certain technology that we could handle, while simultaneously they would be allowed to sort of harvest DNA material to work with their program to reinstate their fertility or whatever they were doing. So most of the terrible stories that I hear that do involve painful procedures, or sperm being taken, or ovum being taken, or the woman being used really just as a kind of a birthing chain, kind of as a holding pen, and then they remove the fetus. I mean, I've heard all kinds of stuff, but it is my belief, from what I've been told, that these terrible procedures timed out. There was an agreement. It timed out in the 80s at some point, and these kinds of horrible things, I really don't come across them except as maybe as something that happened long ago. In other words, the experiencer has to be probably at least my age to have been a fertile, young woman or young man in the period of time where between the boomer time, between, the end of World War II and the mid 80s, I would say. So, so that is, but there are many types of grays. I think there are even some grays that are not fully physical, that are more android-like, or, robotic, if you will, and are used really for deep space travel and have only rudimentary thoughts.
Well, what's your thoughts on what happened in Florida at the mall, or in Las Vegas not too long ago?
I'm so sorry. I'm not sure I know
Okay.
what you're referring to. Tell me.
supposedly there was ETs at the mall in Florida,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's also these ETs in someone's backyard, and it was on the news and all that stuff. And they were supposedly really tall. It shows like a little bit of shadowy character in the very backyard.
Oh.
And yeah, I don't know if I'm surprised you haven't heard about that.
Well,
Yeah.
disclosure, I mean, there was an incident where there were ETs that appeared at a ufology convention down south in Florida as well.
Hmm.
So I think that contact is beginning in a different way. I don't trust the government. The government is
Yeah.
the government has spent God knows how many $1 trillion on all kinds of programs, sophisticated engineering, medical stuff way in the future. People here are dying, right? I think they've taken all kinds of sophisticated tech, and I just don't trust that anything of truth is going to come through the government. This is not political. It's not Democratic. It's not Republican. It's just we know there are trillions of dollars missing from the defense budget that have gone into the secret space program. We have been lied to. Technology has been withheld. We've been treated like children who can't get their heads around the idea that it's a universe full of life. We felt that we're alone, cut off. Not true. So, yeah, I think what's happening is a grassroots movement because, the internet really can't be controlled. I mean, they can F with us a bit here and there and screw around with this and that, but basically, we have broadcasting freedom, which is something that did not occur in the 50s, 60s, 70s, or 80s. So it's new, and it's the tool that we use to get our word out and to find like-minded people. And there's nothing that's going to stop disclosure now. Now, I don't know, are you familiar with Daryl Anka? He's
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
an amazing guy who channels Bashar. Well, Bashar
yeah.
has said that in 2024, we are now beginning a 10-year period of contact. And the first beings that have been chosen to make contact with us are called the Yael. And the reason that they have been chosen is because they look really a lot like us. They're our genetic cousins, if you will. So we will be seeing tall, slender, sort of red-haired or Nordic beings, but that is exactly what is supposed to happen. The government, there's not going to be any landing on the White House lawn. They tried that. They tried that with Valiant Thor. They tried that in the 50s. They had, there were craft that buzzed the White House.
Yeah,
Not
footage,
going to
yeah.
happen. Not going to happen because we are dealing with greed. And we're dealing with greed, which is unfortunately, I'm afraid to say it may be a characteristic that we inherited from our Anunnaki progenitors. But greed is a bad, bad thing, and it prevents all kinds of stuff. So I think we're in the era of disclosure, and it's happening at a grassroots level. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if either you or I actually met a being of the Yael at some point in the near future. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, right now in my treatment room, many of the experiencers, what they are doing is really channeling in real time. In other words, I can say, would you please ask the being X, Y, and Z? And then an answer will come back. So we're in a terrifically exciting era. You're here, you're part of it. In fact, my next book is going to be called Midwives of Disclosure, which means, men, women, we are all birthing the new era, despite the government situations, despite being lied to, despite being laughed at, F them.
What?
It's all
Well,
happening. Nothing's going to stop it.
yeah, that's awesome. You brought up Mars earlier, and there was a book in the 40s or the 50s that it shared. It had the face of Mars on it.
Yes.
We now have
Yes.
images, right, of a face-looking structure on
Yes.
Mars.
Yes. Yes. And that is the tomb of Anu. Ning
Wow.
Shida went there to Mars and created that edifice, and that's where he was buried. The ruler, was it Anu? It was the ruler before the one where the exploration happened. He was the first guy to show up in the marshes and realize that there was gold, and he eventually escaped to Mars, where he was assassinated, and that is a monument to him. And there's all kinds of other stuff too that has been found. I mean, remnants of buildings and structures that look oddly, Greco-Roman or Egyptian. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that's been found. I think that according to the work of Sitchin, what happened on Mars, because it was a way station for the Anunnaki to transport gold back to the homeworld, um, there were some um, uh, violent battles with Marduk and amongst themselves, and the atmosphere of Mars was literally ripped away. But on the good news front, the people that I have worked with who have been involved in the secret space program and have been stationed on Mars say that there's terraforming going on, and all of the photos that the sky of Mars is not red, it's blue. They have been
Mhm.
working on terraforming and creating oxygen. Like when you first go, you have to use a little help, but then people adapt. And so they're walking around. So everything that we have been taught is really wrong.
Why are we being taught a whole different narrative?
To keep the masses ignorant.
Mm.
When we realize that we are all special beings with special gifts who have, divine ancestry or incredible, genomes, how can they possibly make us feel bad about ourselves to maintain their control?
Thank you. Are you familiar with the great Gerald Clark and his work?
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, indeed. Oh, how wonderful. Yeah. Incredible. Incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, I love Gerald. I wish he was still with us. I'm friends with his wife, Krista.
Oh, how
So
wonderful. Oh, well, what a dear, forward-thinking, insightful, brilliant soul, really. And but he's on the other side, watching it all play out.
oh, for sure.
And watching it all play out. We are going to see, Boo Boo, we're going to see some exciting times. We're going to see some exciting stuff. And I'm very excited about the conference I have coming up in Toronto, because we have a lot of leading experts on disclosure, and we'll be able to hear exactly what's going on and what kind of chicanery our governments are involved with. So all will be revealed. The truth will come out, and we're going to see some amazing stuff in our lifetime.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to have you back, because there's so much stuff we could touch on. But before we go, maybe you can share a few experiences you had working with someone that had these experiences with these ETs, like maybe one positive and one negative, because obviously some people come back with a lot of trauma, right?
They do, but often the trauma is really related to distorted memories. I'm just going to harken back to the big, the experiencer research project that we did for MUFON. And of all the hundreds, thousands probably of cases that we all took on, only maybe 30% of them were frightening or negative. That means 70% of the encounters were positive, and some of them were even like, spiritually elevating, even just beyond positive. So there is nothing to fear. If I would have one message that I would like to send to your viewers and listeners today, it would be, do not let fear stand in the way of your exploration of what you feel may be significant memories. Most of the time when we get in there, the fears are about childhood misunderstanding. You know, it's not always what it seems. And the ETs have taken often great care to make sure that we're not afraid, but sometimes that doesn't always work. So don't let this feeling of fear of the unknown prevent you from discovering the amazing things that you may have experienced and continue to experience. So I guess, that's what I would say. So most of the people who come to me have positive experiences. Most of them are almost like living two lives. They're involved in their daytime activities, and then astrally or sometimes physically, they are also involved in positive studies and research and teaching with a wide variety of beings, just like Star Trek. This is what I hear.
Yeah. That's amazing that you said that, because since I was a kid, I remember a few lives that had a little bit of remembrance, but one of them was a Star Trek looking type life. So I appreciate you saying that right now, because I am not crazy,
No,
even
you're
though,
not. And you're not crazy. And you may, in fact, when you believe you're sleeping, you may be astral projecting and engaging in some real positive way with other beings. Most of us make agreements before we come into the earthly plane, and that is what we learn from interlife regression. We're here because we choose to be here at this amazing time. We are here to help others pass through and elevate into this amazing time that is coming.
thank you. My friend Alex, I just talked to my friend Alex yesterday, and he has all these dreams and he feels like he astro travels. Can you touch on astro traveling really quick?
Well, I think it's something that we all can do naturally, but to use it as a tool or whatever, it does require some sort of discipline. Now, it's being taught on the crafts and in these engagements. So your friend may be even having engagements with ETs who are helping your friend to learn how to do it and maintain control. It's a lot easier than putting someone on a craft. It really is. And so we are really dealing with a telepathic universe based on the speed of thought. That's all it's hard to get one's head around it, but I think the dream life can be every bit as valid as the waking life. And I would ask that your friend write down these experiences and see if there is a pattern or a formula or a repetitive theme. And that will make things come a little bit clearer into context. But astral projecting is a natural thing that we are all able to do. We've just been told that we can't do it.
Yeah, thank you. There's that famous Masonic song, row, row, row your boat gently down the stream.
Yeah.
Then it ends up with life is but a dream.
Life is only a dream, which is really, we manifest our reality. And in the third density where we all live, it's very difficult because as the saying goes, this is a dense reality. Yet even in a dense reality, we are still able to manifest things by focusing and visualizing. We can still do it here. But I think in the other realms, even what we call the past life, in which aliens just move on through all the time, but what we call heaven or the past life, people are manifesting their realities through thought. And that's the only difference between there and here.
Wow. Do you have a brief experience you can share with someone that had a really profound spiritual experience with an encounter?
Boy, there's so many. Um, uh, well, I would say one of the most profound things that happened in my office for sure was I was working with the gentleman with which I wrote my first book, Intersections, and he was an experiencer, a lifelong experiencer, and he was in trance, in a very deep trance, and he was told that he was going to get some type of energetic um, uh, lift or step up or something like that. And then I literally saw a being, a being's image superimposed on my client, who was now my client was very tall and slender, but the being that was superimposing themselves was even taller. And
Wow.
I was able to see the image or the astral being of that entity. And it was apparently for my client, it was an incredible spiritual opening where not only was all psychic ability enhanced, but there was, but my client was able to see images of the life experience of the entity that was superimposing galactic travel, novas, children, ET children. So it was a real incredible trip that I was able to participate in, not fully, but I certainly saw the image of that tall, slender ET and superimposing its essence over my client, who was a lifelong experiencer.
Wow. I just pictured Anu and he's holding the pine cone like this. You
Oh,
ever see that
yes,
image?
the pineal
And the
gland.
pineal open,
Yes.
yeah, opening up the pineal gland through this
Yep.
process. So yeah,
Yes.
thank you for
All of
sharing that.
that all of that turns on when we have contact with ETs. In fact, that's what implants are. It's ludicrous when people think, "Oh, they're tracking me, tracking dots," Well, every human brain has a unique energy signature. The ETs don't need tracking dots to find us. It's like turning a radio dial. They can tune into wherever we are. It's ludicrous, but what implants do, and some of them are etheric implants. In other words, they're not even in the physical body, they're in the etheric body, but they're kind of like step up transformers. They help those that are chosen for communication, help them to, in a speedy way, intensify their psychic abilities.
Yeah, thank you. I just got butt implants, so it's totally different. One, but I gotta get them redone because one cheek's smaller than the other, so it looks funny. I was messing around.
It's very bad for the Roomba. Very bad. Es
Let's
no
see, how do we find
bueno.
you?
It's no bueno. I am always available. You can find me through my website, which is Lesley at lightworkhypnosis.com. And that's all one word, all lowercase. And, I always get back to people who reach out to me, even if you just have a question, you want to share something. Please do get in touch. So that's Lesley, Lesley, at lightworkhypnosis.com. And if you're going to be in the Toronto area, please come to the Contact and Disclosure Symposium. And the website is just that, contactanddisclosuresymposium.com. And it's April 20th. And we are going to have we're going to jump down that rabbit hole, baby. We are. That's right.
Yeah, thank you. And I will definitely be
Yeah.
uploading your links when I upload this video. So I really appreciate you
Wonderful.
coming on. And thank you very
Oh,
much.
Boo Boo, thank you so much. My pleasure. And have a really blessed Holy Week and Easter. And I would love to come back and chat with you any old time. So you
Thank
just
you.
send up a flare, okay? All
Definitely. I'd love
right.
to have you back. So take care and thanks again.
Thank you. Muchas gracias, carnal. Okay. Ciao. Bye-bye now. Bye.